Alright, I'm gonna need you guys to hear me out here. So you want to do your very first Fire Emblem Ironman. Let's start off with what that is. You go through the entire game. If a unit dies, they're dead. No coming back, they are gone. And if your lord dies, or if there's a condition that makes you fail a map, well, you died, you lost, it's over, you lose. There's some things you should keep in mind before you go and try to do this. Let's start off with some basics. You should know the overall plot of the game and about what chapter comes after each one, so you won't be surprised by an extra map or an X chapter that you wanted to get but now can't. Because you have to keep in mind with X chapters, you generally only have one chance to get them, and a lot of them depend on having a unit alive. To be blunt, you should have a really good understanding of the mechanics for whichever game you're going to be doing. There's stuff like Super Canto, Normal Canto. Super Canto allows you to attack then run away. Normal Canto usually just allows you to rescue and then run away. Since each game has its own mechanic, you want to make sure that you fully understand it before you accidentally use it in a way you can't or shouldn't. Like, certain games have weapon art, some like Three Houses that allow you to put swap or shove on any character as long as you grow them correctly. It's important to know everything you have access to, so then you'll know how to strategize around it. You should know how to recruit every character. That's kind of mildly important, so then you can actually get your stock built up in case someone has to die. And on top of that, for games like FE4, Awakening, and Fates, how the kids work. So if you're pairing someone up, you know that they're going to take the top skill from their inventory on each side. If you abuse your lord too much and they die, the entire run's over, so you always have to keep that in mind when using them. However, there are certain instances like Robin when they're just completely busted, so it doesn't matter if you abuse them, but it's always good to make sure that no matter what, your lord won't die, because you don't want your run to just be Thanos snapped away. Come mid to late game, there's going to be secret shops. It's always a good idea to know where those are and how to access them so that you can get the stuff that's inside. What is inside can generally be killer weapons, there can be stat boosters, and there can even be promotion items which will help your units, especially if you lost some and used all your promotion items already. Let's talk about jagens. So one of the things you need to know is do you have a jagen or do you have an Oi Fei? So what a jagen is an early game unit that usually comes with a lord that has really good stats at the beginning, but it has bad growth rates usually due to old age, and then he falls off pretty hard. And then there's Oi Feis, and Oi Feis are generally, they look mid-aged, and they have pretty good growth rates still throughout the game. Yes, they're promoted, and technically they don't have as much of a chance of getting extremely high cap stats, but a good chunk of them are going to be really useful throughout the whole game, and that way you don't bench them when you shouldn't, you know? It also really helps to be able to use your jagen, because a lot of people usually put them on the bench because they're like, they'll be bad later, when in fact they can save your whole run. When it comes down to it, they are your big buff unit that at the beginning of the game can save you from losing another unit, and a lot of the time it's overlooked. And I think if you're doing an Ironman, it's always good to know how to use your jagen so then you can get yourself out of a tough spot. Or if you really need to, most of them are on calves, so they can pick up and rescue. Jagens also start out with high weapon experience, meaning they can wield silver weapons and a whole bunch of other stuff that gives them the edge on other opponents. Something else to keep in mind is you probably want to baby your early flyer. Flyers are super, super useful in these games, but they are also very, very, very susceptible to just a single arrow, especially early game when they have almost no defense. They usually start off with mid speed, meaning they can only double bandits at the start. So meaning they can get hurt pretty bad because they usually don't have any defense either. You want to be really careful where you place them, because there's also these things called ballistas, and man, you're going to want to be able to check where those are all the time and not just accidentally lose your flyer. Items become pretty important. Let's say you have a vulnerary. Most of the time I don't use them because I have a healer, but in the end, if a unit has a vulnerary, it can save you, because you just end up with 3 HP and you're like, shoot, I can't get a heal this turn, or you even only have a couple healers at a time anyway. So having a vulnerary, elixir, concoction, those can all save you. Something else to keep in mind for the items is, when it comes to items, pure water is extremely overlooked, because it can raise your res on your warrior that has 3 res, and it can save you against a whole bunch of magic. I'm not saying you have to use it all the time or anything of the sort. I'm just saying that a lot of people overlook it, and it could pretty much save your life sometimes. So it's not a bad idea to keep that on the low res units. Promotion items can be really important because some games aren't like Path of Radiance, where as soon as you hit 20 you promote. And on top of that, something that I'd recommend doing is most of the time when you get your healer to 11, unless it's 3 houses, just promoting them right there. because that generally gives them a defense and speed buff, as well as it allows them to usually get access to a magic, meaning they can actually do damage as well and help out your team. All weapons and items are meant to be used. If you need to use a brave weapon, siege magic, or something like that to keep your unit safe, please don't take the unnecessary risk. Most of the time it probably won't come to bite you in the butt, but on those times it does, you don't want it to hurt and then you just lose out on one of your units for the rest of the run. Something else to keep in mind is you don't have to do every map. There are some paralogs, X chapters that aren't necessary to do. If you know it's going to be Fog of War and you're not prepped for it, don't do it. They might have 3 killer ballistas, and if you can't do it, there probably isn't a good reason for you to do so. There are very few games where the X chapters are like, mean you get the extra access to the end of the game. I'm looking at you, Binding Blade. This is it. You're at the point where you know you can't save someone, and there's no chance that someone is not going to die this turn. You've done the math, and you're absolutely sure. Make sure that whoever you do end up sacrificing can be replaced. You don't want to be losing someone like your 1 mana key you get in the game to something like this when you could have risked a random fighter that you never were going to use anyway. Make sure that the person you choose to sacrifice is someone you will not be missing later, or it's someone that can be replaced in a chapter that comes forward. And with all of that, that's the best advice I could think of giving. I couldn't find any video like this on YouTube when I was looking around before I did my first Ironman recently, and I just wanted to pass along those tips. I thought that might be a good experience. So, hope you guys had fun. Leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it, and adios.